Do you want to hear something completely insane? 99% of investors are pouring their money into EV stocks thinking they are the future of clean tech. But I have a confession. I think that's the worst place to put your money right now. The valuations and strong competition pretty much guarantee that you will lose money. If you want to make the smartest clean tech investment today, you need to look at an unheard of company called Aduro. There are three very good reasons for why that is. Let's get into it. I'm Amateur Investing, and my videos cover companies I'm personally invested in, general investing knowledge, small and micro cap analysis education, and financial independence. Let's get into the content. So we're going to look at the three reasons why I think Aduro is a really good investment and potentially the best clean tech investment that you currently can make. So, I think they have the best plastics recycling technology that no one can copy, and they have a one-of-a-kind water-based plastics recycling tech that doesn't produce a lot of toxic byproducts and is very easygoing and operates on low temperature. So it's quite a bit of a more gentle recycling technology. Yeah. So the tech can handle mixed plastic types, and trash doesn't bother it as much as the other plastics recycling technologies that are around, where especially if you put something like a PVC pipe in there, the whole machine gets clogged up. And Aduro can handle even like these multi-layer films where there are like 2 or 3 different plastic types pretty much glued together. Aduro doesn't really worry about that. They can still recycle it really nicely. The output is clean and ready to go. There's no cleanup needed. You don't need a huge hydrogen plant that other technologies need. That's like super expensive, annoying, and whatever. The output is just clean, ready to go. Doesn't need anything after it's done processed. There are also in many countries around the world, especially like in the European Union, there are lots of countries that give big subsidies or have like taxes on plastic, for example, and you can get the money back if you actually recycle the plastic. So, I think that makes Aduro a really good investment, I think. Their technology has also very low emissions. So, countries who care about plastics pollution, they typically also care a lot about greenhouse gas emissions, and that's a big plus. And some of the output gases that the recycling process produces can be used to power part of the plant, so you reduce electricity requirements. And this is not just money savings, but also against environmentally pretty nice. And the company has already 15 years of trial and error and many patents and trade secrets, so it's gonna take a very long time for competitors to catch up. And that's why I'm saying here that it's a technology that no one can really copy. And the tech is really not just promises. It's not just one of those companies who just promises the world and doesn't even show off anything. They're validated by 10 plus companies that are working for Aduro, and everything seems to be as it is. And they didn't break any promises so far by promising what the technology can do, and so far everything worked as expected. I also passed a 3-year validation program with Shell, the oil company, right? Like a very, very big player. So they would have called this tiny company out if something was out of line, and they passed the 3-year validation positively, right? So they said, hey, exactly what you said, it works, and it will probably be commercially viable as well. And I worked very closely with Total Energies, another very big oil company, and they're still working with them. The collaboration is already ongoing over a year, so very, very good signs that the technology is actually what it is, and they're not just talking, right? So the second point is that currently the company is completely ignored by institutions and mainstream retail. The market cap is only $300 to $400 million, and that's about as much as a big shopping mall. So really pretty much nothing if you just compare the big shopping mall with the best plastics recycling technology in the world. They can it makes sense that it's the numbers just don't line up, right? It should be way more valuable. There are almost no analyst coverage and very few institutional investors. They're just right now starting to get a couple of institutional investors and big firms, whatever, but just the beginning, right? There are also no big clean tech investors that even have the company on their radar yet, no big influencers, no big ETF managers, nothing like that. So it's still very, very early on. And the value of the company really is undeniable, right? If you just look around the sphere, companies with similar promising tech are trading in the single or double-digit billions, right? A lot of, there are tons of companies that have these revolutionary, super promising sounding technologies, and they have even less proof than Aduro, and still they're trading, at 2, 5, 10, 20 billion dollars. Most retail investors still don't get the impact and the value that Aduro's technology will provide, right? Just pretty much solving the plastics pollution problem once and for all. Like, this has so much value, and it's definitely not 3 or 400 million, right? And a lot of investors still think it's a theoretical experiment that has to be proven. I mean, maybe they think that because, if it was actually real and not just promises, there's no way it would be at 300-400 million, right? So they see the low stock price or the low market cap and see like, hey, what am I missing? Like, the company would have been at like 20 billion if it was actually real. So what's going on here? And I think, it's like all of the people think that, and that's why the stock price is this low. And, what do you think will happen once people figure out that this is the real deal? And, they're really, understand what an absolutely monumental technology this is, and they start like having fear of missing out. And even if the stock rallies hard, they have to keep buying in and keep buying in, right? Like, this is just crazy. The upside here is massive, I think, right? And the third reason is, the company is about to take off. I really believe so. There are a lot of factors right now that are lining up that are both suppressing the stock price currently and additionally, just loading the rocket fuel into the stock. Like, we're about to get the very, very first result from their first test with commercial grade equipment. So before then it was, more like lab experiments, right? They had like specially made equipment, they all tested it, and now they have built a little bit larger plant with all commercial grade equipment. So you're gonna see if this is just a lab experiment or if it's the real deal that can be, built into hundreds of plants and produce billions of dollars. And already they have preparations underway for a small commercial plant, so way, way bigger than this small test plant. And, this plant is going to be around completed and giving us some test results around the middle of 2027. And they're already obviously preparing for it because it takes quite a bit to build the plant. But, it's also very, very exciting. Like, once this actually goes online and people can like do the math and figure out like how crazy, insanely valuable this technology is. I mean, again, rocket fuel is being loaded up as we speak into the stock. It will start with converting agricultural plastics waste into stuff that fresh plastic is made from, which is like circularity. So, this small commercial plant is really going to be showing us that, there's a lot of plastics in agriculture, right? So we're going to see if this actually works. And, if it works, people will be crazy amazed, and, circularity will be finally there for plastic, even though right now, most of the plastic is like completely worthless. And yeah, it's just polluting the environment. They already have a customer lined up who will buy their output, no questions asked, for this first small commercial plant. So even if you have doubts, oh, will someone buy this? No, there's already a buyer. They lined up, they signed, contracts, and it's gonna be great. They already have an offtake agreement, so yeah. And already they started to create a licensing package, so other companies can build that the recycling plant based on the technology that Aduro has and pay them a licensing fee. Right, so it's like similar to other franchise companies, right? So they gonna create like a big licensing package. Hey, I want to build a Aduro technology plant where I want to recycle plastic. Okay, we're gonna give you all the licensing details, all the, what you have to build, what equipment do you need, etc., right? And for that, you give Aduro a revenue, which is an amazing business model because you need way, way less capital, right? Like, and yeah, you still get all the upside. And yeah, currently, as we speak, they are reaching out to Wall Street and ETF contacts so they can put real money to work if needed. So, especially in the beginning, they're probably going to build like 2, 3, 4 of their own commercial plants. And, they're going to need like, let's call it like $200 million for that. So, with the stock price at like 300 to 400 million, this would be crazy dilution. So, hopefully by that point, the stock price is going to be higher, or if not, maybe they get something like a joint venture or something. That's why they're reaching out to these big providers. So maybe the stock price goes to an actually reasonable value so they can build the commercial plans without completely diluting the shareholders. So in summary, you should be saying, am I biased because I've been a loyal Aduro investor for about 2 years now? Well, the answer is pretty clear. Yes, I am very biased. But on the other hand, will this company create tons of millionaires and people who can finally quit their jobs to do what they want every day of their lives because their returns have been so amazing and, they got to their financial goals way earlier than expected? Also, yes. But on the other hand, will most people keep chasing companies like Tesla, for example, where they think this is like the future of renewables, right? Will most people keep chasing companies like Tesla at over $1 trillion? And, I want to remind you, Tesla is a company that had zero revenue growth for the last 3 years. and it's still priced as a growth company, which makes absolutely no sense. It's trading on promises that, you know, are very questionable, and the company has an operating margin currently of about 5%. So does that sound something that should be worth, you know, a lot and that you should be really excited about in the future? No. But, you know, most people will keep chasing it, right? Because most people would rather lose like 75% of their money in a stock like that rather than invest in Aduro and make life-changing returns because they're scared or they just don't know how to invest or evaluate companies. So they see a small company, oh, that's probably risky. But I would argue, you know, a company as cheap as Aduro is way, way less risky than paying over $1 trillion for Tesla, which has no growth and is, you know, the value is like based on some promise that, you know, is theoretical, where Aduro's technology is real, is being tested currently, and there's tons of interest. There are already partners like Shell and Total, which have given the green light. So I don't think these people are stupid, right? Like, technology is obviously real, and it's just a matter of time before people figure it out. And then you can come back to this video and claim this was all luck. That, you know, the one company I currently talk about on my channel is the one company that went 10x, 20x, 50x, right? You will think this is luck, but, you know, I hope you remember that, you know, this is based on facts and forecastable numbers, and it's just not luck and not gambling. The company is Aduro Clean Technologies, ticker symbol ADR on the Nasdaq. Do your own due diligence before investing any money, and thank you guys for watching.